Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So we are starting our summer break class. We are going to revise the Bhagavad Gita shlokas that we have memorized so far. We'll be memorizing Bhagavad Gita. We will be revising the shlokas that we have memorized so far from chapters 1 to 9. So the way we are going to do it is we'll be revising 3 chapters. So now we'll revise the latest 3, 7, 8, 9, and we will recite the same verses every day for 1 week. And then next week we will take 3 more chapters and we will recite the memorization shlokas that whole week. And the following week we'll take the remaining 3 chapters. The idea is to revise the shlokas which we have learned. So this will be for the first half hour, and then we are going to begin reading Mahabharata. And our goal is to complete the whole Mahabharata during the summer break. So we will divide the chapters accordingly, so that some chapters are long, so maybe we'll read only 1 chapter when the chapters are long, and when the chapters are not so long, we'll be reading less. We'll be reading 2 or 3 chapters a day. So we will see how it goes. Maybe read for 1 hour. We will read Mahabharata for 1 hour, and it can be extended up to noon if required, but not beyond that. So now let's begin with prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll share the screen of the Bhagavad Gita shlokas. We'll be reciting chapters 7, 8 and 9 this week. So follow the shloka on the screen and you recite along with me. We'll do it together. Bhagavad Gita chapter 7 text 9. Is the font okay, or should I make it bigger? Okay, better. All right. You have all learned this before, so there shouldn't be any difficulty in reciting. Verse and translation. Chapter 7 text 1. Sri Bhagavanu Vacha Maya Saktamanah Partha Yogam Yunjan Madashrayah Asamshayam Samagram Mam Yatha Gyasyasi Tachrinu. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Now hear, O son of Pritha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt." 7.2 Jnanam teham savijnanam idam vakshyamya sheshatah yajgyatva neha bhuyonyaj gyatavyam avashishyate. Are you reciting, Madhava? I shall now declare unto you in full this knowledge, both phenomenal and numinous. This being known, nothing further shall remain for you to know. 7.3 Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye yatataamapi siddhanam kaschin mam vetti tattvataha. Out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. 7.4 Bhumirapo nalo vayuhu kammano buddhirev cha ahankara iti yamme bhinna prakritirashtadha. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, all together, these eight comprise my separated material energies. 7.5 Apareyam itastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. Besides these, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mind which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. 7.6 Etadyonini bhutani sarvanityupadharaya aham krishnasya jagataha prabhavaha pralayastatha. All created beings have their source in these two natures. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. 7.7 Mattah parataram nanyad kinchidasti dhananjaya mai sarvam idam protam sutre manigana iva. O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. 7.8 Rasohamapsu kaunteya prabhasmi shashi suryayoh pranavah sarva vedeshu shabdah khe paurusham nishu. O son of Kunti, I am the taste of water, the light of the sun and the moon, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras. I am the sound in ether and ability in man. 7.10 Bijam mam sarva bhutanam vidhi partha sanatanam buddhir buddhimatamasmi tejas tejasvinamaham. O son of Pritha, know that I am the original seed of all existences, the intelligence of the intelligent, and the prowess of all powerful men. 7.11 Balam balavatam chaham kamaraga vivarjitam dharma viruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatarshabha. I am the strength of the strong, devoid of passion and desire. I am sex life, which is not contrary to religious principles, O Lord of the Bharatas, Arjuna. 7.12 Ye chaiva satvika bhava rajasastamasascha ye matta eveti tan vidhi natvaham teshu te mayi. Know that all states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am, in one sense, everything, but I am independent. I am not under the modes of material nature, for they, on the contrary, are within me. 7.13 त्रिभिर्गुणमयैर्भावैर् एभिः सर्वम् इदं जगत् मोहितं नाभिजानाति मामेभ्यः परमव्ययम्. Deluded by the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. 7.14 दैवी ह्येषा गुणमयी मम माया दुरत्यया मामेव ये प्रपद्यन्ते मायामेतां तरन्ति ते. This divine energy of mine consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. 7:15. Namam dushkritino mudha prapadyante naradama mayaya pahrita jnana asuram bhavamashitaha. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, who are lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. 7:6. Chaturvidha bhajante mam jana sukritinarjuna arto jigyasurartharthi jnani cha bharatarshabha. O best among the Bharatas, four kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute. 7:17. Tesham jnani nityayukta eka bhaktirvishishyate priyo hi jnaninotyartham aham sa cha mama priyaha. Of these, the one who is in full knowledge and who is always engaged in pure devotional service is the best, for I am very dear to him and he is dear to me. 7:19. Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam prapadyate vasudevah sarvamiti sa mahatma sudurlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. 7:20. कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानाः प्रपद्यन्तेऽन्यदेवताः तं तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. 7:22. Sataya Shraddhaya Yuktas Tasyaradhanamihate Labhate cha tatah kaman mayaiva vihitan hitan. Endowed with such a faith, he endeavors to worship a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. 7:23. अन्तवत्तु फलं तेषां तद्भवत्यल्पमेधसां देवान् देवयजो यान्ति मद्भक्ता यान्ति मामपि. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet. 7:24. अव्यक्तं व्यक्तिमापन्नं मन्यन्ते मामबुद्धयः परं भावम् अजानन्तो ममाव्ययम् अनुत्तमम्. Unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. 7:25. Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavrita mudhoyam nabhijanati loko mamajam avyayam. So it should be samavrita. There's a typo. It's not samavrita, samavrita. Translation. I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them I am covered by my internal potency, and therefore they do not know that I am unborn and infallible. 7:26. Vedaham samatitani vartamanani charjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani mam tu vedana kaschana. O Arjuna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me no one knows. 727. इच्छाद्वेषसमुत्थेन द्वन्द्वमोहेन भारत सर्वभूतानि सम्मोहं सर्गे यान्ति परन्तप. O scion of Bharata, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate. 728. येषां त्वन्तगतं पापं जनानां पुण्यकर्मणां ते द्वन्द्वमोहनिर्मुक्ता bhajante mam dridhavrataah. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. So we'll recite chapter 8 and chapter 9 also. Chapter 8, 8.5. Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram यः प्रयाति samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshayah. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. 8.6. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tadbhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. 8.7. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhya mayyarpita mano buddhir mame vaishyasya samshayah. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. 8.8. अभ्यासयोगयुक्तेन चेतसा नान्यगामिना परमं पुरुषं दिव्यं याति पार्थानुचिन्तयन्. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, is sure to reach me. 8.14. अनन्यचेताः सततं यो मां स्मरति नित्यशः तस्याहं सुलभः पार्थ नित्ययुक्तस्य योगिनः. For one who always remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O son of Pritha, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. 8.15. माम उपेत्य पुनर्जन्म दुःखालयम् अशाश्वतं नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः संसिद्धिं परमां गताः. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. 8.16. आब्रह्मभुवनाल्लोकाः पुनरावर्तिनोऽर्जुन मामुपेत्य तु कौन्तेय पुनर्जन्म न विद्यते. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. 8.17. सहस्रयुगपर्यन्तम् अहर्यद्ब्रह्मणो विदुः रात्रिं युगसहस्रान्तां ते होरात्रविदो जनाः. By human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. 8:19 भूतग्रामः स एवायं भूत्वा भूत्वा प्रलीयते रात्र्यागमे वशः पार्थ प्रभवत्यहरागमे. Again and again, when Brahma's day arrives, all living entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they are helplessly annihilated. 8:20 परस्तस्मात्तु भावोऽन्यो व्यक्तो व्यक्तात् सनातनः यः स सर्वेषु भूतेषु नश्यत्सु न विनश्यति. Yet there is another unmanifest nature which is eternal and is transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. It is supreme and is never annihilated. When all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. 8:21 अव्यक्तोऽक्षर इत्युक्तस्तं आहुः परमां गतिं यं प्राप्य न निवर्तन्ते तद्धाम परमं मम. That which the Vedantists describe as unmanifest and that which is known as the supreme destination, that place from which, having attained it, one never returns, that is my supreme abode. 8:28 वेदेषु यज्ञेषु तपस्सु चैव दानेषु यत् पुण्यफलं प्रदिष्टम् अत्येति तत्सर्वमिदं विदित्वा योगी परं स्थानमुपैति चाद्यम्. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal abode. Chapter 9, Text 1 श्रीभगवानुवाच इदं तु ते गुह्यतमं प्रवक्ष्याम्यनसूयवे ज्ञानं विज्ञानसहितं यज्ञात्वा मोक्षसे शुभात्. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. 9.2 राजविद्या राजगुह्यं पवित्रम् इदमुत्तमं प्रत्यक्षावगमं धर्म्यं सुसुखं कर्तुमव्ययम्. This knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. It is everlasting and it is joyfully performed. 9.3 Ashraddhana Purusha Dharmasyasya Parantapa Aprapya Mam Nivartante Mrityu Samsara Vartmani. Those who are not faithful in this devotional service cannot attain me, O conqueror of enemies. Therefore, they return to the path of birth and death in this material world. 9.4 Maya tatamidam sarvam jagad avyaktamurtina matsthani sarva bhutani na chaham teshvavastitaha. By me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. Bhagavad Gita 9.5 न च मत्स्थानि भूतानि पश्य मे योगमैश्वरम् भूतभृन्न च भूतस्थो ममात्मा भूतभावनः. And yet everything that is created does not rest in me. Behold my mystic opulence. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, and although I am everywhere, I am not a part of this cosmic manifestation, for myself is the very source of creation. 9.10 मयाध्यक्षेण प्रकृतिः सूयते सचराचरम् हेतुनानेन कौन्तेय जगद्विपरिवर्तते. This material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. 911. अवजानन्ति मां मूढा मानुषीं तनुमाश्रितं परं भावम् अजानन्तो मम भूता महेश्वरम्. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the Supreme Lord of all that be. 912. मोघाशामोघकर्माणो मोघज्ञानाविचेतसः राक्षसीम् आसुरीं चैव प्रकृतिं मोहिनीं श्रिताः. Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. 913. महात्मानस्तु मां पार्थ दैवीं प्रकृतिमाश्रिताः भजन्त्यनन्यमनसो ज्ञात्वा भूतादिमव्ययम्. O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. 914. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dridhavrataः namasyantascha mam bhaktya nityayukta upasate. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, these great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. 917. पिताहमस्य जगतो माता धाता पितामहः वेद्यं पवित्रम् ओङ्कार ऋक्साम यजुरेव च. I am the father of this universe, the mother, the support, and the grandsire. I am the object of knowledge, the purifier, and the syllable Om. I am also the Rig, the Sama, and the Yajur Vedas. 921. ते तं भुक्त्वा स्वर्गलोकं विशालं क्षीणे पुण्ये मर्त्यलोकं विशन्ति एवं त्रयी धर्ममनुप्रपन्ना गतागतं कामकामा लभन्ते. When they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure and the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, those who seek sense enjoyment by adhering to the principles of the three Vedas achieve only repeated birth and death. 922. अनन्याश्चिन्तयन्तो मां ये जना पर्युपासते तेषां नित्याभियुक्तानां योगक्षेमं वहाम्यहम्. But those who worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. 923. येऽप्यन्यदेवता भक्ता यजन्ते मां श्रद्धयान्विताः तेऽपि मामेव कौन्तेय यजन्त्यविधिपूर्वकम्. Those who are devotees of other gods and who worship them with faith actually worship only me, O son of Kunti, but they do so in a wrong way. 924. Aham hi sarva yajnanam bhokta cha prabhurev cha natu mam abhijananti tatvena tascha vantite. I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. Therefore, those who do not recognize my true transcendental nature fall down. 925. Yanti deva vrata devan pitrin yanti pitrivrataha Bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti madhyajinopi mam. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings, and those who worship me will live with me. 926. Patram pushpam phalam toyam yo me bhaktya prayachati tad aham bhaktyupahritam ashnami prayatatmanah. Pay attention, yo me bhaktya, not bhakta. K-T-Y it should be, okay? Translation: if one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I will accept it. 927. Yat karoshi yadashnasi yajjuhoshi dadasi yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kurushva madarpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, and whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. 929. Samoham sarvabhuteshu na me dveshyosti na priyaha ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya maite teshu chapyaham. I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. But whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him. 930. अपि चेत् सुदुराचारो भजते मामनन्यभाक् साधुरेव समन्तव्यः सम्यग् व्यवसितो हि सः. Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. 931. क्षिप्रं भवति धर्मात्मा शश्वच्छान्तिं निगच्छति कौन्तेय प्रतिजानीहि न मे भक्तः प्रणश्यति. He quickly becomes righteous. Yeah, we didn't memorize this, but there's two more verses and the chapter is over. We'll just do it anyway. He quickly becomes righteous and attains lasting peace. O son of Kunti, declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes. 932. Mam hi partha vyapashritya yepe syu papayonayah striyo vaishyas tatha shudras tepi yanti param gatim. O son of Pritha, those who take shelter in me, though they be of lower birth, women, Vaishyas, and Shudras, can attain the supreme destination. Okay. 933. Kim punar brahmana punya bhakta rajarshayas anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasvamam. Oh, there's more. Okay, we'll just stop here. So it's okay. I'll just finish. Okay. How much more this is so of the righteous Brahmanas, the devotees, and the saintly kings. Therefore, having come to this temporary miserable world, engage in loving service unto me. 934. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vaishyasi yuktvaivam atmanam matparayanaha. Engage your mind always in thinking of me. Become my devotee. Offer obeisances to me and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. So we have completed chapters 7, 8, and 9. Every day we will be reciting these three chapters for 1 week until this week, and because we started on a Thursday, so next week also we'll be reciting the same three chapters so that these verses get registered in our memory. And then we will go to chapters 4, 5, 6 for 1 week. And after that we'll do 1, 2, 3 for 1 week, like that. So let me see. Now we'll read Mahabharata. We'll begin reading Mahabharata from the beginning. They're taking Lord Jagannath into Gundicha temple now in Puri. Mahabharata. Mahabharata. Okay. So we will just start from the beginning. I don't think we need to do the introduction. All of you have heard Mahabharata before. So we'll just start with chapter 1. So Mahabharata has 2 parts and there's 4 appendices in the end that we will read towards the end, or if required somewhere in between when we come to that section we can read it. We'll start with, there's part 1 and part 2. Part 1 has 48 chapters and part 2 has 36, I think 35. So part 1, chapter 1, birth of the Kuru elders. Okay, should I make it bigger or is it okay? It's good. Okay. Do we have to read the appendix for this introduction, Isha, or no need?
Which appendix?
Let me see. Bhishma's heavenly origin, Karna cursed, Karna's birth. No, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah, we'll just start. Okay, part 1, chapter 1, birth of the Kuru elders. Ambika peered curiously into the mirror as her maidservants finished adorning her in preparation for the nuptial bed. She had lost none of her beauty despite her months of mourning. Her skin was flawless and as white as milk. Curling jet black hair framed her oval face. Bow-like eyebrows arched over her black eyes, which curved like 2 lotus petals. No wonder Vichitravirya had been so enamored of her, rarely leaving her side. While he was alive, her maidservants had adorned her each evening, just in case her lord had desired to approach her. As Ambika again put on her ornaments and fine dress, her mind drifted sadly back to the days she had spent with her husband. After having lain in that great hero's powerful arms, how strange to now be preparing to meet another man. Ambika balked at the prospect, and she felt herself growing increasingly restless. She dismissed the maidservants as they fussed around her. She needed to be alone to think. When Vichitravirya had died in such an untimely way, she had wanted to ascend his funeral pyre and follow him to the heavens. She could not imagine living without him. But Satyavati, the queen mother, had restrained her. She still had a duty to perform, despite the fact that they had enjoyed so much pleasure together. After 7 years of marriage, they had not produced a child. Without leaving an heir, the king was guilty of neglecting a prime duty. How then would he be able to reach the higher regions? Satyavati had convinced Ambika and her co-wife Ambalika to stay and fulfill their husband's duty and thereby secure the welfare of his soul. The scriptures allowed that in times of emergency, a man's elder brother could conceive children in his wife if he was unable. I'll read that again. The scriptures allowed that in times of emergency, a man's elder brother could conceive children in his wife. Okay. So a man's elder brother could conceive children in his wife. That means the older brother is impregnating the younger brother's wife. Um, this was okay. The scriptures allowed that in times of emergency, a man's elder brother could conceive children in his wife if he was unable. This was such an emergency. Ambika suddenly felt more peaceful. Her union with Bhishma would not be a betrayal of the love she felt for her husband, but a service to him and to the kingdom. She stopped her restless pacing and lay down on the ivory bed in bashful anticipation. Bhishma was a powerful and righteous man. Who better to sire the future king? She should ensure that he felt completely honored by her. So you understood what's going on here. Vichitravirya has left his body, he died, and there is no king now for Hastinapur. And this was an emergency. There should be an heir. So who can impregnate? So there is Vichitravirya, Chitrangada were two brothers. Both of them are dead. Chitrangada was not even married. Vichitravirya was married, but without giving any children, he died. And there is, of course, Bhishma Dev, who vowed not to marry and not to have kids. So now Satyavati convinced the wives of Vichitravirya, Ambika and Ambalika, to unite with the older brother of their husband. So Ambika is thinking, so Bhishma Dev is going to come. So at first she was worried, but then she thought, no, this is my service, and Bhishma Dev is so great, so honorable. If he's going to be the children or the father of the children, then the children will be very good children, right? They can actually become the king. So she is now peaceful. That's what is going on. There was a knock at the door while she's waiting. Ambika looked up shyly. The door opened, and a tall man entered. Ambika's blood turned cold. This was not Bhishma. There in her bedchamber stood a wizened, ugly, and filthy ascetic. His matted locks hung about his gaunt face, and he stared at her with fierce eyes. His teeth were only slightly less black than his complexion. Around his waist was a soiled loincloth, his only garment. His hairy body was encrusted with dirt. Without any delay, he came toward her and sat by her side. She instantly recoiled from the foul stench emanating from his body. Who was this person? She knew of no brother in law other than Bhishma. She prayed to the gods that she might lose consciousness, for how could she endure this fearful man's touch? As he put his hands on her dress, she closed her eyes, barely able to repress her urge to scream. So obviously, she was shocked, petrified. Anyway, Satyavati blamed herself. If it had not been for her father's greed, if it had not been for her father's greed, Hastinapur would not be in such a precarious situation now. Here sat the powerful Bhishma, son of the goddess Ganga. There was no greater hero on earth. As the eldest son of the righteous king Shantanu, he was the natural heir to Hastinapur's throne. But the kingdom's good fortune had been thwarted by her foolish father on her behalf. So that part will actually come when we read about Bhishma Dev. So mm, there was a condition that Satyavati's father put a condition for Satyavati to marry Shantanu. Shantanu already had Bhishma as the eldest son, and he was also the crowned prince. He would become the next king. But Satyavati's father put a condition that only Satyavati's children can become the next king. And Bhishmadev promised on behalf of his father, yes, I will not claim the throne. Let her sons become the king. But then he said, no, you won't claim, but your children will claim because you are the oldest son. Then Bhishmadev said, all right, I will never marry. I will remain a celibate throughout my life. That's why now Satyavati is cursing her fate, and also she's thinking it's all because of my father's greed. Otherwise, who can be more qualified than Bhishmadev to be the king, the ruler? So she's thinking all this while Ambika is in the room with Vyasadeva. That sage was Vyasadeva. She could vividly picture the events. It had seemed to be like any other day. She was sitting by the river's edge, waiting to row travelers across. Her father, leader of the fishermen, had given her that duty so she would gain the religious merits born of service to travelers. On this particular day, however, the emperor of the world, the mighty Shantanu, had been hunting in the nearby forests and was seduced by the alluring fragrance that emanated from her body. Having sought out the source of that celestial scent, he had become bewitched by her beauty. From his gaze, it was obvious he desired to marry her. Upon hearing that she was still unmarried, he had hurried to her father's house to ask for her hand. When she herself had arrived home, she saw Shantanu leaving their humble hut in dismay. Her father had stipulated, he put condition, that he could only marry her if he promised the throne to her son. But the emperor already had a qualified son in Devavrata, and he had already been consecrated as the prince regent. The king was not prepared, simply for his own pleasure, to wrong his worthy and beloved son. Thus he left, his heart torn by desire. Satyavati too pined, right? She also felt very sorrow. She was sad. She too had pined for many days, praying to the gods to arrange her union with the king. Then one day, unknown to Shantanu, Devavrata appeared at their hut to solicit her hand on the emperor's behalf. Her father repeated his condition, and Devavrata agreed. He would never ascend Hastinapur's throne. The crown could go to Satyavati's children. Still, her father hesitated. He had heard enough about court intrigues to know that if Devavrata relinquished the throne, then Devavrata's children might feel cheated and oppose Satyavati's son. The fisher king voiced his doubts. Hearing them, Devavrata uttered a terrible vow. He would never accept a wife, but would maintain lifelong celibacy. In order to secure his father's happiness, he said, he was ready to renounce all personal enjoyment. In order to secure his father's happiness, he said, he was ready to renounce all personal enjoyment. Satyavati now recalled that when Devavrata made that vow, flowers had rained from the sky and a thunderous voice had echoed from the heavens. From this day his name shall be Bhishma, one of a terrible vow. Satyavati looked at Bhishma now as he sat respectfully before her. So this is again in the present. She spoke his name and he looked up, ready to execute her command. Maybe she could yet convince him. He had always been obedient to her, even more so, even more so since Shantanu's death. My dear Bhishma, please think again, the queen said as she pulled her fine silk sari over her plaited hair. You made your vow simply to secure the interests of your father and me. I now absolve you of that vow. You have always been fixed in virtue. Please consider our present situation. Just as you made your vow to serve your elders, you should now serve them by acting for the welfare of our line. Surely this is your duty. Ascend Hastinapur's throne and beget powerful sons to secure this ancient kingdom's future. What is Satyavati saying? The kingdom has no king, and you are here. You are the oldest son, and you are more than qualified to be the king. Just take the kingdom. You rule the kingdom. Bhishma shook his head in exasperation. Mother, please do not ask me to stray from the path of truth. It can never be as you suggest. The sun may renounce its splendor, water its wetness, and the sky its sound, but Bhishma will never renounce truth. Bhishma asked Satyavati to consider the deeper cause of the unexpected emergency facing the kingdom, right? He's telling Satyavati, consider what is the cause for this situation. It was due to all powerful destiny. How else could it have come to pass that although Satyavati had borne two powerful sons, both had died without producing an heir to the throne? All the kings on earth had paid tribute to Satyavati's eldest son Chitrangada. His reputation for prowess in battle and unwavering virtue had reached the heavens. It was thus that the mighty king of the Gandharvas, who bore the same name, that means there's a Gandharva king who was also called Chitrangada. Hmm. So that's how, because this Chitrangada's fame became known all over the world, even in the heavenly planets. So this Gandharva called Chitrangada, he also heard about this Chitrangada on earth, how glorious he is. Hmm. So, so it was thus that the mighty king of the Gandharvas, who bore the same name, became envious upon hearing his glories. The jealous Gandharva could not allow another famous and powerful Chitrangada to live. He came to earth and challenged his rival to battle. After years of fighting, right, not 1 or 2 days or a few days, for several years they were fighting. After years of fighting, the valorous son of Satyavati was slain, and the proud Gandharva returned triumphant to the heavens. Then the powerful Vichitravirya ascended the throne, but suddenly died from an illness after only 7 years of ruling. Neither he nor his brother left a child. Bhishma stood up and looked out of the latticed window. A full moon illumined the palace gardens, casting a silver light across the broad sandstone paths where Vichitravirya had loved to walk with his queens. He turned back to Satyavati and continued, Mother, we cannot thwart providence by acting immorally. In all circumstances, a virtuous man acts in obedience to the will of God. Auspiciousness and victory always attend virtue, while grief is the sure result of unrighteousness. Therefore, please do not ask me to abandon my vow. Satyavati sat silently. Bhishma's adherence to truth and virtue was unshakable. He had spoken well. She bowed her head as he went on. In any event, Mother, it seems destiny has provided us with a solution quite in keeping with religion. If the illustrious Vyasadeva produces offspring upon the queens, we shall be saved. Let us pray that everything goes well. Satyavati nodded. It was she who had summoned the powerful Rishi Vyasadeva, her firstborn son. It had taken some courage for her to reveal how she had given birth to that sage even in her maidenhood. Out of fear of public censure, she had hidden this fact for years. But she still remembered how the celestial Rishi Parashara had one day come onto her boat and begotten the great Vyasadeva in her womb. Parashara had told her that Providence had destined her for greatness. He was giving an illustrious son who would play an important role in that great destiny. Parashara had then granted her the boon of keeping her maidenhood even after union with him, and it was he who had blessed her with the celestial fragrance which had captivated Shantanu. Satyavati slowly paced the mosaic floor. Hundreds of golden oil lamps lit up the great hall. Along the high walls hung fine paintings of her ancestors, going all the way back to the mighty King Kuru. All of them had been powerful emperors of the globe. Surely the Kuru dynasty would not end now. The queen said, I have been praying for the kingdom ever since my son's demise. I have faith that Vyasadeva will prove a shelter to us all. But seeing the adverse fate afflicting us, I still cannot help but be fearful. Satyavati felt deeply for the kingdom and for Shantanu's line. She still acted out of her love for the departed monarch. It was certainly providential that Parashara had given her Vyasadeva as her son. Vyasadeva had grown to maturity immediately upon his birth and had left her, saying, Dear mother, should you ever be in difficulty, then simply think of me. I shall come to you at once from wherever I may be. As Bhishma and Satyavati spoke, Ambika's door opened and Vyasadeva came out. Bhishma bowed at his feet, and Satyavati anxiously asked, "Will the princess bear an accomplished son?" Raising his hand in blessing as Bhishma stood up, the sage replied to Satyavati, "The queen will bear a son who will be as strong as 10,000 elephants. He will be vastly intelligent, wise, and prosperous. He will have 100 sons. But, O pious lady, for the fault of his mother, he will be born blind." Satyavati was shocked. "How can one who is blind become a king of the Kuru race?" she asked. Vyasadeva explained that he had gone to Ambika, prepared to beget a son worthy in every way, but the queen had closed her eyes in fear when she saw him. When agreeing to produce an heir to the throne, the sage had stipulated that the queen must accept him in his unpleasant condition. Satyavati had summoned him from the Himalayas, and he had come to her directly from his practice of harsh asceticism. He kept himself unwashed and unkempt as a part of his ascetic vows. He said, "I would have come to the queen in a handsome form, decked with jewels, if she had first accepted a religious vow for 1 full year. But you asked that she conceive immediately. Therefore, I stated my conditions in place of the religious vow." Satyavati cursed herself for her impatience. She had not wanted to wait. Without an heir to the throne, the kingdom was in constant danger. In a land without a monarch, even the rains would not fall regularly, and the gods would not be propitious. Therefore, she had begged Vyasadeva to approach the queen at once. Now, this, a blind son, how could he ever become the king? "You must give another king to the Kuru race," she implored. "Please approach the other queen, Ambalika." Vyasadeva looked upon his anxious mother with compassion. He soothed her fears. Soon he would return again to beget another child. She need only summon him when Ambalika was prepared to receive him. Vyasadeva then disappeared from the spot. Satyavati turned and spoke to Bhishma. "This is what I feared. I must now ask Ambalika to receive the sage. I pray that she will be more successful than her sister." So, should I just continue? Yes? Okay. Within a month, Vyasadeva was called. Once again, he came from his austerities and appeared in a repulsive condition. Satyavati led him to Ambalika's bedchamber, and the sage at once entered. Even though she had been warned by her sister what to expect, the princess was still struck with horror when the grim ascetic approached her. She turned pale with fright, although she kept her eyes open as she conceived. Vyasadeva then said to the horrified princess, "As you have turned pale upon seeing me, so your son shall also be pale. He will therefore be named Pandu, the Pale One." The rishi then left the room. He met his mother outside and she asked about the child. Vyasadeva replied to her that a greatly powerful boy would be born, but he would be pale. Satyavati again felt anxious. The child would be pale? What did Vyasadeva mean? Something was still not right. And in any event, even if everything was fine with this child, with only one qualified prince, the kingdom would still be in a precarious position. Vyasadeva should try once more. She asked him to again approach Ambika. This time, the princess, knowing what to expect, would keep her eyes open. Vyasadeva smiled and replied, "Be it so. I shall return again shortly after she has delivered her first child." In due course of time, Ambika gave birth to a blind child who was named Dhritarastra. Ambalika delivered a pale child who was nevertheless effulgent and endowed with many auspicious marks on his body, and who was named Pandu in accord with Vyasadeva's words. Soon after, the sage again came to the palace in order to approach Ambika for a second time. The queen was alarmed at the prospect of meeting again with the terrible looking rishi. She went to a maidservant who was an intimate friend and asked that she take her place, giving the servant her own ornaments and adorning her with the finest robes. She had her wait in the bedchamber for the sage. Although he knew everything, the rishi entered the chamber as before. As soon as she saw the exalted sage, the maidservant rose up respectfully. She bowed at his feet and had him sit down comfortably. After gently washing his feet, the girl offered him many kinds of delicious foodstuffs. Vyasadeva was pleased. After laying with the girl, he said, "O good natured girl, you shall be a maidservant no longer. Your son from our union will be wise, fortunate, and the foremost of all intelligent men upon this earth." Again, Satyavati was waiting outside the bedchamber. Vyasadeva told her, "The queen deceived me and sent instead her servant. That simple girl received me with all respect. She will therefore bear an auspicious child. O mother, I shall now go and continue my asceticism. I will return when you need me, but I will not beget any more children." Vyasadeva vanished, leaving Bhishma and Satyavati reflecting on his words. The maidservant gave birth to a child named Vidura, who later became the chief minister and advisor of the Kuru house. He was raised alongside his two brothers, and the three boys grew up like resplendent gods. Everyone was satisfied that the kingdom was secure. Happiness and prosperity were everywhere as the gods showered their blessings on the kingdom. Bhishma ruled as regent while the boys grew up. Although Dhritarashtra was the eldest, his blindness disqualified him from becoming the king. Nor could Vidura assume the throne, as he was born of a servant girl. But Pandu was a worthy monarch in every way, and when he came of age, he was installed on the Kuru throne. Pandu excelled all men in archery, and he soon became skilled in the Vedic science of leadership and diplomacy. All three brothers were given the best education and were raised with affection by Bhishma. As predicted by Vyasadeva, Dhritarashtra displayed immense bodily strength, and Vidura was naturally wise even from childhood. His devotion to religion and morality could not be matched by anyone. When he reached maturity, even the learned Bhishma would seek his counsel. It was thus that one day Bhishma approached Vidura and said, "O wise one, we should take steps to ensure that our noble line does not again face extinction. The two princes are ready for marriage. I have heard that there are three princesses worthy of being allied to our house. Tell me your thoughts on this, O Vidura." Bhishma said that there was a princess in the Yadu house named Kunti, another named Gandhari, who was a daughter of the mountain king Suvala, and a third princess named Madri in Madra. He suggested that two of these girls could be sought for Pandu and the other for Dhritarashtra. Vidura folded his hands and replied, "My lord, you are our father, our protector, and our preceptor. You should do whatever you feel is proper for the welfare of our dynasty." Bhishma paced up and down his palace chamber. He had heard that Gandhari had received a boon from Shiva, who had said she would have 100 sons. Surely she would make a good wife for Dhritarashtra, who had also been blessed in a similar way by Vyasadeva. 100 sons from that powerful prince would be a great asset to the kingdom and would ensure the perpetuation of the Kuru dynasty. Bhishma at once arranged for messengers to go to Suvala and ask for the hand of Gandhari. When King Suvala heard Bhishma's request, he was hesitant. How could his daughter marry a blind prince? But Suvala reflected on the possibility. Dhritarashtra belonged to the glorious Kuru house. They had ruled the world for thousands of years. Considering the fame, nobility, and virtue of the Kurus, Suvala assented to the marriage. He had his son Shakuni "Bring Gandhari to Hastinapur." When the princess heard that she was to marry the blind Dhritarashtra, she took a cloth and bound her own eyes, not wanting to be in any way superior to her lord. Shakuni gave away his beautiful sister to Dhritarashtra, along with many gifts sent by Suvala. Mhm. After being duly respected by Bhishma, he then mounted his golden chariot and returned to his kingdom. Gandhari became immediately devoted to her husband. She pleased him in every way by her attentions. She never even referred to other men in her speech, and her eyes were always covered by the cloth. So, just a note here, Gandhari got extraordinary powers because of her chastity. She was a chaste wife. So, we see the principles that are observed by a chaste wife, right? To not be superior to her lord because he was blind, she didn't want to be superior to him, so she blindfolded herself. And she would never talk about other men in front of her husband, like other men who were glorious or great, which would make her husband feel that he is inferior, like that. So she pleased him in every way by her attentions. She never even referred to other men in her speech, and her eyes were always covered by the cloth. With Dhritarashtra married, Bhishma turned his mind to Pandu's marriage. He had heard that the princess Kunti would soon select a husband at a special ceremony known as Swayamvara. That princess was famous for her beauty and womanly qualifications, and she belonged to the noble Yadu race. Bhishma told Pandu to leave at once for the Swayamvara and try to win Kunti's hand. The king mounted a great dark stallion and rode swiftly to the southern kingdom of Kunti Bhoja, the father of Kunti. Like a proud lion, so Kunti Bhoja is adopted Kunti. Kunti is actually the daughter of um, Kunti is the sister of Vasudeva, right? So the daughter of Shurasena. But because Shurasena's good friend was Kunti Bhoja and he didn't have any children, so Shurasena gave his daughter. So Kunti Bhoja adopted, her name was Pritha, and he adopted her, and now she is known as Kunti, the daughter of Kunti Bhoja. So that's where the Swayamvara was being held. Like a proud lion, he strode into the Swayamvara arena. Who? Pandu Maharaj. When the many other kings assembled there saw Pandu, broad chested and with eyes like a furious bull, they considered him to be a second Indra. He outshone all the other monarchs, like the sun rising in the morning and obscuring the stars. When Kunti saw the powerful Hastinapur monarch gazing at her, her mind became agitated. Trembling with emotion, she walked slowly toward him and shyly placed the nuptial garland around his neck. So there was no competition as such, like there was no, uh, usually sometimes there is someone has to pick up a bow and there's some challenge. There was no such challenge. The bride could choose. So Kunti ji went and selected Pandu Maharaj. Although there were many kings and princes desirous of Kunti's hand, and although a Swayamvara would almost always end up in a fight, the kings abandoned any thought of competing with the mighty Pandu for the princess. Mounting upon their steeds and chariots, they simply returned the way they had come. King Kunti Bhoja came down from the royal platform into the arena, his face bright with delight. There could be no better match for his daughter. The king immediately arranged for the wedding ceremony and he presented Pandu with gifts of great wealth. After a few days, the couple left for Hastinapur, accompanied by a large retinue bearing many colorful pennants which waved in the breeze like a big procession. The soldiers beat drums and blew loudly upon their conch shells as they proceeded toward Pandu's capital. Seated with Kunti upon a shining golden chariot and surrounded by Brahmins offering benedictions, Pandu entered Hastinapur in state. Bhishma was overjoyed to see Pandu married to the gentle and beautiful princess, but he also felt that the king needed another queen. Although Gandhari had received the benediction that she would bear 100 sons, Kunti had no such boon. Bhishma wanted to ensure that the virtuous monarch was blessed with powerful sons. He went personally to the kingdom of Madra to seek the hand of Madri for Pandu. She was under her brother's King Shalya's protection. King Shalya received with all honor Bhishma and his retinue of ministers, Brahmins, and rishis. He brought Ganga's son into his palace and offered him a seat of white ivory studded with precious gems. Then the king bathed his feet and offered him argya. His reception completed, Bhishma said to King Shalya, O king, you should know that I am here to seek a maiden. I have heard that you have an illustrious and chaste sister, and I have chosen her for King Pandu. Please tell me if you approve of this arrangement. King Shalya replied that the Kuru house was more than worthy of being allied with his house. There was, however, an ancient custom in his family that no girl could be given in marriage unless the suitor offered a tribute. Bhishma had already heard of this custom because it dated back to the great Brahma himself. He had come prepared and thus replied to Shalya, there is no fault in this custom, as it has the approval of the self born creator Brahma. Therefore, please accept the gifts I have brought in exchange for the princess. Bhishma's men then carried in heaps of gold coins, pearls, corals, and gems of various colors and set them before Shalya. Bhishma also presented the king with hundreds of elephants, horses, and chariots. Shalya received all the wealth with a delighted heart. He then gave Madri to Bhishma, who then soon returned to Hastinapur and performed the wedding ceremony. Pandu established each of his wives in their own splendid palaces and gave himself up to enjoyment with them both. He sported in the palace groves and gardens, appearing like a celestial with two beautiful consorts. End of chapter 1. So today was the first session. How do you feel? Do you want me to read another chapter or is one chapter good? How many of you want me to end here? Raise your hand. Nobody's raising. Okay, so I can read another chapter. Chapter 2, because we want to complete Mahabharata before school begins. And we have about, how many? I think 86 or some chapters. So we'll have to do more in between. If we read only one, it will go into September and October also. So let's see. Chapter 2, Pandu cursed and blessed. Although possessed of all material opulences, Pandu was by nature disinterested in sensual enjoyment. Having enjoyed with his two wives for only a short while, he found his mind turning to other things. Although the Kuru dynasty had for many thousands of years been emperors of the globe and had upheld religious codes, their hold over other kings had begun to slip with the death of Shantanu and his two sons. Some of the kings were now becoming arrogant, exceeding their own boundaries and antagonizing weaker kings. Pandu felt impelled to take action. Going before Bhishma, he said, my lord, our dynasty's greatness has suffered diminution. The world is straying from the path of righteousness established by our ancestors. Irreligion is rising. It is my duty to our noble house, and indeed to the Supreme Lord himself, to go out and check the offenders. So who is saying this? Pandu is telling Bhishma Dev that we are losing our position. There are antagonistic kings who are not accepting the rulership of the king of Hastinapur, the emperor. So it is our, and also they were straying away from dharma. So as the emperors, it is our responsibility to establish dharma. So we should go and check the offenders. Bhishma smiled. Here indeed was a worthy descendant of the great Bharata, after whom the very earth had been named. He replied, your desire befits our line and is praiseworthy in every way. Take blessings from the Brahmins and then leave with an army. May victory attend you. Pandu quickly assembled a vast force consisting of infantry, horsemen, elephants, and chariots. As he left Hastinapur, he looked like the king of the gods, surrounded by his celestial army. Pandu marched to the east and defeated the king of the Dasharhas, who was becoming averse to Hastinapur's rule. Moving south towards Magadha, where the powerful king Dirgha was assailing many surrounding countries, Pandu attacked the proud king at his capital, Rajagriha, and killed him. After that, Pandu subjugated several other warlike kings. He ranged across the globe like a fire, his far reaching arrows and the splendor of his weapons resembling brilliant flames. As his fame spread, monarchs submitted without resistance. Soon all the world's kings recognized him as the most powerful ruler on earth. They bowed to him with joined palms and offered tribute of various kinds. After this 1 year campaign, Pandu returned to his capital with the wealth he had obtained. All the Kurus, with Bhishma at their head, came out to greet him. They viewed with delight the train of elephants, oxen, camels, horses, and chariots, all laden with riches and stretching farther than the eye could see. It was like a sea of carts filled with treasure. Pandu then presented to the Kuru elders the precious stones, pearls, coral, gold, and silver piled in heaps, along with millions of cows, horses, and other animals. He showed them innumerable costly blankets, rugs, and skins from the rare black renku deer. Pandu bowed at Bhishma's feet as he presented all this wealth, and Bhishma tearfully embraced the young king. Surrounded by Brahmins, uttering prayers and benedictions, the two men then mounted a golden chariot and proceeded to the royal palace, heralded by a fanfare of trumpets, conches, and kettle drums. Pandu ensured that his two brothers were each given much wealth. He had little personal interest in wealth, being more attracted to forests and plains than to the luxurious palace life. So, yeah, he gave a lot of wealth to his two brothers. He was not interested in wealth. He loved to mount his stallion and ride out on long hunting expeditions. Thus, a few months after returning to Hastinapur, he decided to make his permanent residence upon a hilly slope of the Himalayan range. Taking his two wives with him, he left his magnificent palace and moved to a simple dwelling on the mountainside. The local people would see the monarch roaming the woods with his wives, encased in beautiful blazing armor and armed with bows and swords. He resembled a god wandering on earth. Dhritarashtra officiated as the king in Hastinapur on behalf of his younger brother. At his command, the forest people would supply Pandu with every object of enjoyment. Pandu had mastered his senses, so although he gracefully accepted their gifts, he continued to live simply. One day, Pandu went out hunting. He saw a couple of large deer mating. They bolted when they saw the king, but he quickly fired 5 swift arrows after them. As the golden feathered shafts pierced the male deer, it fell down crying. To the king's surprise, the dying deer began to speak in a pained voice. Oh, how shameful! Even degraded men who are slaves to their senses never act so cruelly. No man's judgment can ever prevail against the ordinance of Scripture. How then have you, the king and a descendant of the noble Bharata race, acted so in conflict with Vedic ordinance? Pandu stood before the deer, which was weeping bitterly, and replied, as a king, it is my duty to hunt. I thus control the forest, making it safe for the rishis. At the same time, I am able to practice the kingly art of weaponry. Furthermore, Even great sages in the past have killed deer in the forest by offering them in sacrifice. Oh dear, why do you reprove me? The deer replied that it did not condemn Pandu for injuring it, but for not taking into consideration that it was mating. The deer then told Pandu that it was a rishi named Kindama. He had assumed the form of a deer to mate with his wife in the woods. The rishi had no dwelling and could not unite with his wife in a human form as people would criticize. He had therefore transformed himself and his wife into deer. The king had killed him just as he was about to beget a child in his wife's womb. Kindama continued, "No creature should be attacked at the moment of intercourse. Your act was extremely cruel and sinful and is liable to lead you to hell. It is especially reproachful as you are a king and are meant to chastise the wicked and protect the tenets of religion." Pandu gazed at Kindama in shocked silence. He had spoken correctly. It had certainly been sinful to shoot at the deer as it mated. How had he allowed himself to be so overcome with passion? And what would come from having killed a rishi? This was a calamity. The king hung his head in shame. Seeing Pandu's crestfallen condition, Kindama said, "You need not fear the sin of killing a Brahmin, as you did not know my true identity. But as you killed me when I was indulging in pleasure, so too shall you meet your death at such a time." The rishi wanted to free Pandu from his sin. By cursing the king, Kindama knew that Pandu would immediately receive the reaction for his misdeed and thus not have to suffer after death. Struggling to speak as his lifeblood ebbed away, Kindama uttered his fearful imprecation. "When next you approach your wife out of desire, you will immediately fall dead. O king, as I was plunged into grief when I was happy, you shall also meet with grief at such a time." So there's also a lesson here that uh, when we commit some sinful activity, the king or the government, when they give us punishment for that, then we will become absolved from that sinful activity if we are punished. If we are not punished, if we escape that punishment, then we will have to suffer in the next life, either going to hell or taking birth again and suffering. So it is good to get punishment right away. That's why we have the Kshatriyas to give punishment. So in this case, out of compassion, Rishi Kindama cursed Pandu Maharaj. The deer then gave up its life. Pandu stood for some moments unable to move. As he gazed at the deer's dead body, hot tears ran down his cheeks. Gathering his wits, he returned to his hut. Mind you, Pandu Maharaj still doesn't have any children. He immediately told his wives what had happened. Afflicted by sorrow, the king wept aloud with his two queens. He condemned himself again and again. Holding his head and lamenting, the king spoke in an anguished voice. "I have heard that my father, although born of a virtuous man, was himself a slave of lust and died as a result." Vichitravirya. "Having been begotten in the wife of a lustful king, I too have become afflicted with lust. I have become devoted to sin. My life is simply spent in killing innocent creatures. The gods have forsaken me, and I stand cursed." Pandu resolved to live a life of austerity. He declared that from that moment he would accept a vow of celibacy as Bhishma had done. He would seek salvation by renouncing all sexual pleasure, the great impediment to spiritual understanding. Pandu spoke to his horrified wives. "I shall shave my head and cover my body with dust. Sorrow and joy will be equal to me. I will entirely renounce anger and I shall be devoted to the good of all creatures. I will accept no gifts and I will obtain my food by begging. In this way, I shall transcend the dualities of this world and rise to the highest regions where the Lord Himself resides." So, this path of accepting austerities in order to control one's mind, right? This is the path of jnana. This is not the path of bhakti. Just a note here. So for this, the beginning is Nishkama Karma. And then after that, when one succeeds in Nishkama Karma, they give up that and then they just they stop doing all work, karma, for their livelihood. And they enter into Jnana, like what Pandu Maharaj uh, has decided to do. The king asked his wives to return to the capital and inform his elders of the turn of events. They should gratify the Brahmins on his behalf, giving them much wealth. For his part, he would immediately retire into the wilderness and leave society forever. Yes, Kunti and Madri were torn by grief. They could not face the prospect of separation from their husband. In piteous voices, they begged that he allow them to follow his path. Both queens were prepared to accept whatever austerities he accepted. On behalf of them both, Kunti said, "Let us together accept the order of Vanaprastha, retirement in the forest. We shall be happy practicing asceticism with you. If you leave us today, we shall not bear our lives any longer." Pandu relented, but he made it clear that he intended to perform the strictest austerities. His wives were not deterred. They wished only to be with him wherever he went. Pandu resolved to embark on his ascetic life immediately. He would not return to the society. He removed all his royal ornaments and gave them, along with his riches, to the Brahmanas. Then he said to his attendants, "Go back to Hastinapur and inform Bhishma of everything that has occurred." The royal attendants and Brahmins left sorrowfully for Hastinapur. The citizens lamented loudly when they learned of Pandu's plight. Dhritarastra was especially afflicted. Thinking of Pandu living so austerely in the forest, he could no longer derive pleasure from the comforts of his beds, servants, and royal opulences. He continually wept and brooded over Pandu. After the Brahmins and attendants had left, Pandu made his way into the forest with his wives. They walked steadily north for many days and finally arrived at Saptasrota, the 100-peaked mountain. There the king constructed a wooden hut and began to engage in severe penance. Many rishis, siddhas, and charanas lived in that region, and Pandu soon endeared himself to them by his qualities of humility, self control, and devotion to his elders and to God. They would frequently visit his hut to converse with him. With his mind fixed only on salvation, Pandu lived quite simply at Saptasrota. He ate only fruits and roots and drank clear water from mountain springs. His two wives accepted the same vows he had taken, and thus all three lived joyfully on the mountain like celestials descended from the higher regions. Wait, all three lived joyfully on the mountain like celestials descended from the higher regions. Gradually, over time, Pandu thought more about his situation. One day he spoke to the rishis, revealing his fears. "O greatly learned ones, I have heard that a sonless man cannot attain heaven. By having sons, one pays his debts to his ancestors. If I die without issue, my forefathers will surely perish, as the Shraddha offerings will cease. I am thus filled with apprehension because I cannot beget children." Pandu was anxious. He would often perform the Shraddha ceremony for the welfare of his departed ancestors. The Vedas state that such food offerings made to the gods on their behalf ensure their continued happiness in heaven. Pandu was concerned. What would happen when he died? If he left no children, who would continue the offerings to his forefathers and indeed to himself? He folded his palms in supplication. Could the rishis beget children in his wives, just as Vyasadeva had begotten him and his brothers? So, you see, there are three paths uh, for getting delivered. Actually, there are only two paths. One is jnana and one is bhakti. But to enter into jnana and bhakti, there is another path called karma. So, what Pandu Maharaj is explaining here is the path of karma kanda, you can say. So there You have to. So, what is karma? This is prescribed in the Vedas. So, in a Vedic society, in a Varnashram society, Vedic society, there are duties assigned. Krishna says this in Bhagavad Gita, assigned to each of the groups what duties they should do. That is karma. By performing that karma and offering that karma to the Lord, one actually progresses in spiritual life. So, when we take birth, we all take birth. We have debts. We have debts to our father, to our parents, to our dynasty, to the demigods, because we get free air, we get light, we get water, the earth. We become indebted, and also to other living entities. The trees are supplying us with fruit. So when we take birth, we become indebted immediately. How do you become free from this debt? There's a way to become free. So your debt to your parents is absolved when you yourself produce children and you continue that lineage, for example, like that. All this is karma. But if you actually become a pure devotee of the Lord, if you surrender your life to Krishna and if you become a pure devotee of Krishna, Ananya Bhakta, then you become free from all debts. So here Pandu Maharaj is talking about karma. How will I make progress? That's his point. And to enter into jnana also, you have to first do nishkama karma. That means you still do karma. And then you become detached from the results of that karma. And finally, when you're completely detached, then you enter into jnana. And in the end, the goal of jnana is you want to go and merge into Brahman. So anyway, Pandu Maharaj is concerned here not just for himself, but also for all his forefathers. Who will offer Shraddha? Without Shraddha, what will happen to the ancestors who are in the Pitralokas? That's his concern. And then for me also, after I die, who's going to take care of, right? Who's going to offer Shraddha? So that means now he needs sons. So is it possible that one of these rishis like Vyasadeva begot? Why? How Vyasadeva was able to beget? Because he was the older brother, right? So according to Shastras, that's allowed. So Pandu Maharaj is saying, all of you sages are here. Can one of you beget children in my wives for me, the way Vyasadeva begot us in me and my brother and our mothers? Smiling, one of the rishis replied, by our ascetic powers, we have seen that you will undoubtedly have children like the gods themselves. Indeed, your progeny will fulfill the purpose of the celestials, right? The children that will be born of you, they will satisfy the demigods. Whatever the demigods are trying to achieve, these children will achieve, your children will achieve. All this can be seen clearly by us. Therefore, you should certainly act in such a way as to somehow produce children, right? Your only concern should be just produce children, somehow or other. Your children are going to be great. Pandu reflected on the Rishi's words. It seemed the sages were amenable to his suggestion. He went to Kunti. So, what did Pandu think? Of course, he cannot beget children. So, he thought the sages are saying that I will have children. So looks like the sages have agreed. They're going to beget children in my wives. That's what he thought. He went to Kunti and spoke with her in private. O lady of sweet smiles, I desire offspring. But due to my vicious behavior, I have lost my power of procreation. In such instances, the scriptures sanction that another worthy man may beget children on my behalf. Please, therefore, accept another man and conceive a child for me. Pandu pointed out that even he and his brothers had been conceived in this way. Kunti should thus accept a qualified Brahman who was superior to himself in order to have a child. The noble Kunti did not like Pandu's suggestion. She looked down and spoke softly in reply. O virtuous one, please do not request this of me. I am your lawful wife, ever devoted to you. I shall certainly not accept another's embrace, even in my imagination. O king, embrace me to beget offspring. I shall ascend to heaven with you. Who is there superior to you? Right? So she said, I am ready. If you're cursed to die, I'm ready to die with you, no problem. But don't tell me to go to another person. Kunti recited to her husband an ancient history she had heard. There was once a powerful king who had died without issue. His lamenting wife had embraced his dead body, and by the arrangement of the gods, she conceived children. Three qualified sons were born of her union with her dead husband. Kunti asked Pandu to emulate that king. Even if you die, still I will follow in the footsteps of that queen, and I will also, by embracing the dead body, I will also get children. Pandu replied that he did not possess such power. He preferred she conceive a child by uniting with a rishi. He assured her that no sin was attached to such an act. It was his responsibility, as he was commanding her as her husband, and she should not hesitate to comply with his request. The monarch tried in many ways to convince his wife. At last, Kunti, seeing her husband's determination, said to him, I shall tell you of a boon I received while in my maidenhood, which may yet prove to be our deliverance. When I was a girl in my father's house, he would engage me in serving guests there. One day, the powerful mystic Durvasa arrived. By my service and constant attention to all his needs, I greatly pleased that rishi. As he was leaving, he called me aside and said, O gentle one, I shall confer upon you a boon. Listen as I recite a mantra. This mantra, uttered by you, will summon any of the celestials you desire. Whether agreeable or not, they will then be obliged to do your bidding. Kunti already had experience of the mantra's power. As soon as she had uttered it once and thought of Surya, that blazing deity had appeared before her. He had then conceived a son. Kunti therefore knew that she could summon other gods to produce further children. She had not wanted to reveal this secret, being reluctant to unite even with the gods in place of her own husband. But this was an emergency. It seemed that the time to make good use of Durvasa's mantra had come. Pandu, who had known nothing about the boon, was overjoyed upon hearing Kunti's words. This was surely the Lord's arrangement. Sons from the gods would be far superior to any born of earthly men. Kunti asked her husband which of the deities she should call. Pandu thought for some moments and then said to his wife, O beautiful lady, you should call the great Dharma, the god of justice. He will never be able to pollute us with sin, and his son will undoubtedly be qualified in every way. Kunti assented to Pandu's request. She sat in meditation and thought of Dharma, reciting the mantra Durvasa had given her. Within moments, the deity appeared, riding on a resplendent chariot, shining like the sun. He smiled and said to Kunti, What should I do for you at this time? Awed by the god's splendor, Kunti replied in a trembling voice, I desire a child by your illustrious self. Dharma at once united with her in his spiritual form and then disappeared. Kunti conceived and in due course gave birth. During the 8th month of the year, at noon, uh, uh, conceived and in due course gave birth. So the baby is born and the baby is 8 months. During the 8th month of the year, at noon on a full moon day, when the auspicious star Jeshta was in the ascendant, she brought forth a lustrous son. Okay, 8th month of the pregnancy, she gave birth to the son. As soon as he was born, a celestial voice was heard in the sky. This child will be the best and most virtuous of men. He will be devoted to truth, highly powerful and famous throughout the three worlds. Known as Yudhishthir, this boy will rule the earth. Pandu was overjoyed. The gods had not forsaken him after all. Here was a child worthy of his great dynasty. He no longer had to be anxious. Then he began to consider the situation. He saw that by Durvasa's boon, Kunti could obtain more powerful sons, born of the gods themselves, who would ensure the Kuru's welfare and become great leaders in the world. Pandu approached Kunti again, a year after Yudhishthir's birth, and said, The wise have declared that a ruler should possess strength as well as righteousness. Therefore, please invoke the wind god Vayu, the strongest of the gods. By him we shall get a son who will be the most powerful man upon this earth. Kunti folded her palms and bowed in assent. She again sat in meditation, this time calling for Vayu. In moments, the god appeared, riding a huge deer. In a voice that sounded like thunderbolts, the effulgent god said with a smile, O Kunti, what do you desire from me? Kunti was bashful as she replied, O best of the celestials, please give me a son who will possess immense bodily strength and who will be capable of humbling the pride of everybody. The god agreed, and by his yogic power he approached Kunti and conceived a child within her womb. When Vayu's child took his birth, a voice was again heard from the sky saying, This child will be the best of all those endowed with strength and power. Pandu and Kunti were even more joyful to see their second son, whom they named Bhima. Along with Madri and in the company of the rishis and siddhas, they lovingly raised their children in the remote and beautiful woodlands on the mountainside. Some months after Bhima's birth, Kunti was sitting near the edge of a mountain cliff with Bhima asleep on her lap. Suddenly, a tiger roared nearby. She jumped up in fear, and the baby rolled from her lap over the cliff edge. Struck with horror, Pandu quickly descended the cliff. When he reached the bottom, he saw the child lying unharmed amid a pile of rocky fragments. That means where he fell, he just crushed all the rocks there. The hill was, you know, crushed by the power of the baby. The baby had landed upon a large rock and had smashed it to pieces. In amazement, Pandu gently lifted his child and took him back to Kunti. Even with two sons, Pandu continued to reflect on the future of his dynasty. He thought, success in this world depends upon exertion, but exertion is always subordinate to destiny. Yet, even destiny is controlled by the will of the Supreme Lord. How then can I obtain a son who will be the best of all those devoted to the Lord? So now he wants a devotee, the best of the devotees. Pandu thought of Indra, the king of all the gods and a famous devotee of the Lord. Indra had formerly performed 1,000 sacrifices for Lord Vishnu's pleasure, and he possessed immeasurable might, prowess, and glory. From him would surely come a son who would be superior to all. Pandu consulted with the rishis and was advised that he and Kunti should practice an ascetic vow for 1 year to please Indra. At the end of that period, Kunti should summon the god with her mantra. The monarch and his wife then accepted a vow of standing on one leg from sunrise till sunset. So, something to remember, right? It didn't just happen. For 1 year, both husband and wife they accepted a severe austerity. They would stand on one leg from sunrise to sunset, taking neither food nor water. They kept their minds absorbed in meditation and prayer for 1 complete year, with an aim to please Indra. At the end of the year, Indra spoke to Pandu in his meditation. I have become pleased with you, O king. I shall give you a son who will protect religion and chastise the wicked. He will delight his friends and relatives and slay his foes. Indeed, this boy will be the best of men. Following Pandu's request, Kunti again chanted her mantra. Indra appeared immediately, his bodily luster lighting up the whole region. By the power of the thousand-eyed Indra, Kunti conceived, and in time a dark complexioned child was born. For the third time, the heavenly voice was heard, resounding over the mountainside. O Kunti, this child will be equal in strength to Indra, and indeed Shiva himself. He shall be called Arjun, and he will spread your fame everywhere. He will subjugate many powerful kings and greatly increase the prosperity of your dynasty. Agni, Shiva, and Indra will all be gratified by this boy's service. He shall have no equal in prowess and will be famous throughout the three worlds. Overhearing this, as well as other prophecies regarding Arjun's future greatness, the rishis on that mountain were filled with joy. They uttered blessings while the celestial drums reverberated and showers of flowers fell from the sky. Many gods and heavenly sages appeared before Kunti and offered the child benediction. Only the ascetic rishis could see them as they appeared in their ethereal forms, standing in chariots and on mountain peaks. The rishis were astonished by that wonderful sight and they stood with folded palms. Pandu was delighted. He now had three matchless sons. Seeing the wonderful result of Durvasa's boon, he decided to ask Kunti to use the mantra a fourth time and summon yet another powerful god. When he approached her again, however, Kunti refused. O learned man, even in times of emergency, it is never sanctioned by scripture for a woman to have intercourse with more than 3 men. Have you forgotten the ordinance? I have become debased. I would become debased if I again conceived, if I again conceive by another, if I again conceive by another. The king fell silent. Kunti was right. He decided not to ask for any more sons and continued to live peacefully in the forest with his 2 wives. Their 3 sons grew luxuriantly in their care. Then one day Madri approached Pandu privately. My lord, I do not complain that you treat me less favorably than Kunti. Even though I am of a higher birth, I still have no complaint. My one grief is that you have no sons by me. Madri found her position unbearable. No princesses in her line had ever gone without issue. Kunti had 3 sons. Madri had heard that Dhritarashtra's wife Gandhari had given birth to 100 sons in Hastinapur. Yet she, the lawful wife of a great hero, was childless. She asked Pandu to request Kunti to teach her the mantra. Madri explained that she was too shy to ask her directly since Kunti was her rival. Pandu smiled. He felt compassion for his younger wife. Oh, Madri, I had already been considering this myself. I was reluctant to ask you because I was not sure how you might feel. Now that I know your mind, I shall certainly speak with Kunti. I do not think she will refuse. The monarch immediately the monarch approached Kunti immediately. He told her of Madri's sorrow and asked her to be gracious to her co-wife. Pandu made it clear that he also desired more sons to secure more fully the good of his race, including that of himself and indeed Kunti. Kunti assented to her husband's request and told Madri, O gentle lady, I shall recite the mantra for your benefit. Please think of some deity from whom you desire offspring. Okay, so Kunti is going to recite the mantra, and while Kunti is chanting the mantra, uh, Madri should think of a particular deity. Madri thought carefully. Most probably, Kunti would allow her to use the mantra only once. If she summoned the inseparable twin Ashwini gods, she would get 2 sons at once. Even as she thought of the 2 gods, they appeared before her, aglow with celestial splendor. Bashfully, she asked that they unite with her to conceive children, and they immediately agreed. They begot upon Madri 2 boys of incomparable beauty who were named Nakula and Sahadev. Upon their birth, the divine voice said, These virtuous and accomplished sons will transcend in energy and beauty even their celestial fathers. The rishis performed all the rites of passage for the 5 boys, and they grew up swiftly. Even at age 1, they appeared as if they were 5 years old. Pandu was overwhelmed with happiness at seeing his son's extraordinary strength, beauty, energy, and wisdom. All the boys became favorites of the rishis, and they sported like 5 Gandharvas descended to the earth. Pandu wondered if he might again have another son through Madri. But when he asked Kunti if she would permit Madri to use the mantra again, Kunti became angry and replied, My lord, I was deceived by that wicked woman. Although I gave her the mantra only once, she obtained 2 sons. If I gave it to her again, I fear she may surpass me in the number of children. Pray, do not ask me for this favor any more. Pandu reconciled himself to the fact that he would have only 5 sons, but he was not disappointed. His boys grew up like gods. They were all as handsome as the moon god Soma and as powerful as Indra. They all became fearless bowmen who were capable, even in their early youth, of facing furious mountain lions. The rishis schooled them in every facet of Vedic knowledge. The ascetics were astonished to see the boys growing so rapidly, like lotuses blooming in a lake. Pandu and his wives offered prayers of thanks to Lord Vishnu for their great fortune, and they went on living in the Himalayan region, raising their children with affection. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for joining. Is there any questions, comments, discussions? No? Okay. So, was this okay? Was it too long? It's okay? Okay. So, we will again recite chapters 7, 8, 9 tomorrow. We will do it every day. Saturday, we won't have class because it's Atlantic City Rath Yatra. But we'll do it tomorrow, then again on Sunday, like that. Hare Krishna. Thank you.